The next item on the agenda is discussion, I believe. Discussion agenda. Okay, and that pertains to item 19, discussion of third-party inspection at Piney Woods, shown in Exhibit J. And Mr. Biedenbaugh, is that meet with your approval, sir?
Yes, sir. Mr. Biedenbaugh, yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lovelace, board members, Dr. Ross. We had a couple issues that were outstanding from our last visit with Mead and Hunt at the board. So I've asked them to come back so we can close out this closeout for the third-party inspection. So Mr. Kyle Golden from Mead and Hunt is here to discuss. If you have any questions, he's here to answer those questions. But we wanted to make sure this was finalized before we move to our next step. So I'll ask Mr. Golden to come up. Thank you.
Good evening. Good to see you all again. As you'll see in the new report, I went back with Todd Biedenbaugh on a site visit with the principal as well and addressed all of the items brought up in the previous report at the last school board meeting we attended. And from our findings and through an email with the engineer of record, all items have been either corrected or accepted by the engineer of record. If you'd like, I can go through them one by one. Otherwise, I can open it up to any questions.
Ms. Huddle?
Maybe I'm misreading it or I'm missing some pages, but I didn't see all of the items addressed, like the roof ponding.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see that addressed, the curtain wall. So what's the situation? Did I just miss it? I guess is my first question. Is the roof ponding addressed?
That was addressed. That was actually, we went up on the roof, I think within 24 hours of a fairly significant rain event, and it was dry as a bone.
Is that in this report?
Yes, ma'am, it should be.
What can you?
Page 7 of the appendix.
Yeah, I was just looking for where is it reported that you guys went back up there 48 hours after a rain and everything's fine?
Let's see here. It should be, sorry, I'm checking with you as well as looking up on the screen. It should have been noted at the end of that paragraph discussing the roof, which was on page
7 or 8.
Sorry, I'm trying to find this. The care and maintenance, section A2, and then A2B, I believe there should be on page number 2. There should be a statement at the end noting that after the second visit, there was no evidence of ponding.
On page 2. I don't have a page 2. It goes straight.
Page 3.
Page 3.
Page 3, I
Under
apologize.
roof assemblies, A2B.
That would be, if you can scroll up a little bit there. Yep.
Where's a date on here other than 12/20?
The date should be on the front page of the report. It's just stating as everything was on that date. I believe it was April 22nd.
Okay. All right, corrected. So you're referring to the phrase corrected, roof demonstrated no further ponding after another rain event.
Correct.
Is that, okay. I have some more questions, but I'll let everybody take their turn.
Okay. Go ahead. I think unless somebody else says, go ahead.
Well, and this isn't for you, it's really for the administration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see in here where the architect approved it. And our motion was that the architect had to approve the repairs. That was back on March 28th.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Huddle, because we had a couple outstanding issues, I wanted to make sure Mead and Hunt reviewed it again. That's why Mr. Golden and I went out to the site just to review the corrections that the architect said the contractor said they made, excuse me. So that's why Mr. Golden and I went back out. And I wanted you to see those corrections before we got the architect. I was just trying to close this out, and then I was going to, after you approved tonight, or after we discussed it, then we would take it to the architect for them to approve this as well. I'm just being a little more overcautious, I guess. just to
Okay, well,
make
you
sure.
mentioned close out earlier, so I just wanted to, we're not closing out until the architect.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, one last question and I'm done. There's a picture in here of the curb and gutter repair. I'm not a building person, so I don't know if it's curb or gutter, but it's near the end. It shows like it looks like it was, here's what I do know, how to frost a cake. And it looks like we refrosted the cake. That's on page, let me get there. Page J on page 23. Okay? And my concern is earlier on it said that the concrete was flaking, and it looks to me like we just scraped off the flake, or somebody just scraped off the flake and refrosted it, to use my analogy. And I guess I'm just concerned, why would concrete flake to start with? Did we just patch something that's just going to come right back later?
I believe that's typical for a patch of that size. I think if it was significantly larger, they would have done a more in-depth repair, but that
Okay.
is typical.
I guess what I'm asking though
patchwork.
is why did a brand new concrete flake and crack to start with? And it's already been patched before, because earlier in your report said it had been patched. So it was patched once,
Correct.
it continued to flake, now we're patching it again. So, the definition of insanity, why do we think it's not going to continue to do it is my first question. And my second question is, what would cause brand new concrete to do that in the first place?
Just based off of what I could tell from our site visit, when I could, as you said, you could kind of pull apart the patchwork. I believe it was done and then it was rained on, and then the patchwork wasn't a successful patchwork. But based off of everything we can tell, as I said, that's pretty common patching there for that type of issue. So to me, based off of my best judgment, that should be successful.
So back to my other part, what caused it?
As I said, I believe it was a rain event that happened after the earlier patchwork that
Okay,
failed.
what caused it the first time?
That's-
Why would
to
brand
me,
new concrete
based
do
off of that is on the bus loop, and I wouldn't be surprised if a bus tire ran over it and caused it.
I've got some questions, and Mr. Beedenbaugh, I don't think it's fair to me to ask Mr. Golden some of these, so, and I'm not trying to one-upmanship or anything like that, but I've presented this to the board, to the entire board, and I presented it to your boss, Jeff Burkett, and I had done a PowerPoint presentation back when this was being constructed, and I noted serious defects in the quality of the materials being installed. Some of these, I pointed out to Mr. Burkett the last meeting that some of these truckloads of concrete, 10-yard truckloads, had 100 gallons of water added to them, and still we placed them in the construction and didn't require them to be removed. And the contractor came along with some kind of test report. First of all, they had a Swiss hammer test, which we all know that's not, you don't do that. That's just some kind of made-up test. Okay, and then they came back and core drilled and showed some testing reports, but they could have very well picked and choosed where they wanted to do this. But there was 535 yards of concrete poured. It was not tested, and of that, 335 of it would have been rejected had they called the testing agent to do this. Okay, and I was very specific about this, and I did my homework, and I know what I'm talking about. I have the delivery tickets. I know what I'm talking about. So why would we be, accepting conforming materials to start with. But the second thing, we had a $450,000 owner's allowance for testing of materials. That comes out to $4.29 per square foot of building. The land that we purchased was overpriced, but it was $8.90 just for land. So you can see the value of this testing allowance. We had that in there. And then we go and have non-conforming materials when we paid these people $450,000 to go out there and look at it wasn't your firm, and I'm saying you were brought in after the fact. But then we're expected to accept non-conforming materials, what Ms. Huddle has just pointed out as a result of that. And then we have a quality control program that, guess what was in the contract? Guess what was written in the contract? That the contractor's project superintendent was also the quality control manager. Now, Ms. Gardner and I pointed this out when the contract was written, and nobody did anything about it. So we had the fox watching the hen house. We had somebody that was pushing schedule, pouring concrete at night, out there with no testing. Nobody had any regard for this. I brought it up, and then I was shamed by every member of that board back then for doing so. And quite frankly, somebody's filed an ethics violation on me for doing that. But I just want to know that we are not going to do business like this on these next projects. This quality control stuff is important. Now, I know we got good contractors and we got good architects, but this stuff, $450,000, and yet we're asked to be accepting stuff that's non-conforming. I mean, in your experience, Mr. Kyle, I mean, what would you say if you were the owner and somebody told you had $450,000 and then you do a report and you charged us, I don't know, what, $30,000 to come in and do this?
Slightly less, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then you put in your report that stuff was non-conforming, and then all of a sudden somebody writes a letter and says it goes away. What's the deal? I mean, how can that be?
There's a potential that if the break reports still came out well, the engineer of record could approve it if the PSI was still met. You can't be serious. I mean, somebody puts 45 gallons or 100 gallons, they retempered the concrete 4 times, and you're going to tell me and the truck was on the site for 2 hours and 20 minutes longer than was specified. I know it. I've got the records. I did my homework, and then we're going to accept that stuff. And now Ms. Huddle's question is, what's causing it to happen? And we were standing here like we don't know. Mm-hmm. Come on. I mean, I'm just tired of the game. This stuff is serious. It's important, and we ought to do better than this if we're going to pay this kind of money for testing. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows it. Everybody in here knows that. So let's just, let's call it what it is. But if we got to accept something that's not quality, I don't know why we're doing it. And what I'm getting at is you put it in your report that the joining was not in there, the expansion joints that were required, and all of those things that were not required. That may not be a big issue to everybody in here, but doggone it, we paid for that. We paid for it to be done right the first time. Mm-hmm. We didn't pay for somebody to go out there and saw cut stuff and leave us with some old halfway done stuff. I apologize. But, this is important to us. So anyway, from here on out, we need to be more careful about how we write these contracts and who we put in there to be we don't need the project superintendent who's pushing schedule to be the person that goes out there to test, that's responsible for calling the testing agent. That's just not the way it's done. And we paid $26.6 million for that project. We paid the architect on top of that $1.6 million more dollars. And then we get this back that nobody even looked at it. You made a report, and all of a sudden they write a letter, and poof, it's gone. It's nothing to it. But the architect didn't sign the letter, And
you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and it's not you. I mean, I understand, but that's the frustration that we feel on this board. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for coming out.
No
I know
worries.
it's been a long night, and I appreciate you being
course.
here, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, and I completely understand all of Mr. Lovelace's concerns.
Are you still recommending that we accept this then?
If it is accepted, then to me, that's on the engineer of record who approved it. And
Well, I mean,
if
it's
he's willing
not,
to take
because
that
we didn't hire the
responsibility.
engineer of record. You know, we hired the architect, but that's where you're going with this? You know, is that you're going to take this back to the architect and say, you know, if the liability is on you, Mr. Biedenbaugh, is that what we're going to do?
Mr. Lovelace, I do apologize. I wasn't involved in the project early on when this was going on. I do agree with you 100% that we should have done it different back then. Not being involved in the project at that time, I do, as I've talked to Mr. Burkett and Mr. Golden, that in any future projects, we'll have them or whoever, whatever company the district, the board picks, have them involved early on. And we should have done that, I think, on this project from the very beginning to correct some of the problems that you've stated. I can say that we'll have the architect involved and have them come sign off, have them report to the board if we need to, but going forward on any future projects, I recommend we have a meet and hunt or a similar company involved early on from the very beginning.
Well, the closeout procedure is now in policy FEC, so that this board put that in there on purpose so that we'd have an independent set of eyes telling us. We have an independent set of eyes, and I want to know that the architect has signed off, that he takes full responsibility for these non-conforming materials that he let go in there because he knew about it. Okay, he knew about it. There was no doubt about it, and we want, and that's not the only issue, the concrete. That's not the only issue with this. There's soils issues, there's all kinds of other things. But anyway, he knows about them, and he's going to take responsibility, or we can't sign it off because we didn't do that. Ms. Hammond. Ms. Hammond, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I think this is just on the discussion agenda, and I definitely appreciate, the presentation, and I don't think that, this really boils down to waiting on the architect signing off on it, and I think that we need to wait on that and let the architect, because one of the things I have learned about any construction or building project, it begins with the architect. And so I would want, rather than continuing to, I guess, fuss at this young man, I think we need to just realize that we don't have a complete report to us yet, and it depends on the architect. So I think we should just move on from this discussion and know that Mr. Beatonbaugh will get the architect involved, and that's what we need brought to the board.
Yes, ma'am, I agree. Any more discussion?
We thank you so much for presenting this and waiting to our discussion phase to present it. At this point, pursuant to that closeout policy, I think it's best to let these projects in. We already have a second party that does the inspections on the initial construction. When that's finished, we bring in the third party and then let the third party present their report. And then from everything else, the final closeout will be when the engineer and architect both sign off on it. So we'll proceed with that, and as soon as we get that, put that on the action agenda or discussion agenda based on how many for that final closeout. So we'll bring back, I think in this case it was Quackenbush for their approval.
Yes, sir.
Okay, next, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for coming. Next item on the agenda is discussion of fiscal year 2022-23 general fund budget shown in Exhibit K.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, this is our first of multiple readings of our general fund for discussion for the 2022-2023 school year. We're excited to bring this as outlined in our board policy by the first meeting in May. This begins, again, like I said, the beginning of multiple discussions. The philosophy of this budget on the general, on the operations side, had to deal with two choices. Choice one was to get more people or get more personnel, or choice two was to give our existing personnel more. And so you will see a philosophy of not growing the faculty and staff, but really using the funds that we see to give our frontline workers specifically and our teachers increases. And so we want to look at some of the considerations within this budget. First is that we're dealing with two different versions as they move through our legislature. We have a House version and a Senate version. We believe that the final numbers will come through conference committee. That will happen after the primary. So we're going to take our best estimate of the budget by looking at revenues that kind of show up in both plans, or ones in the Senate plan that we believe are most likely, based on our discussion and our view of the legislative process, we believe will be in the final plan. A lot of this confidence has to do with Proviso 1.79 that within the House plan that's taken out of the Senate plan really provides clarity to that initial House plan of the $4,000 teacher raises. I think everyone is very clear now that that was not intended to go across every cell, and that was takes the local match dollars away, making the flexibility to use these funds, giving the districts more flexibility. So we are looking at the step increase that's provided in both House and Senate plans. The retirement employer contributions, that 1% that we see in both plans. We've heard again how in the Senate plan there was a $2,000 to the state minimum increase and a $4,000 to the state minimum. Again, that's where that flexibility from the previous piece that we saw when we reported a negative 21 million to where we're seeing now is the removal of that Proviso 1.79. So this is minimums here. Now, just as a note, our current minimum, again, bachelor's with 0 years, is 39,853. The minimum on the state Senate side would be 38,000. The employer health insurance premium increase of 18.1 still rests in both of these versions. So you'll see a budget reflecting us taking care of that. You see talk between 5 to 8% increases on bus driver salaries. We are going to be very competitive, so you'll see an increase in that as we do our best to secure bus drivers within this budget. Some of the major changes that you'll see that will come out in both of these plans is the distribution of EFA money and EIA money. Never, I guess, in the 40 years of EIA have we made a contribution to it. This year, in its new roll-up, we will be doing a 25 match as opposed to what we've seen in previous years of a 70-30 on the EFA side. And I'll go over how those were, how that's going to be different. As you remember in the House version, that new formula, that percentage of the pot, we had a hold harmless there. The Senate version does what they talked about in the Senate Education Subcommittee as a stake in the ground, meaning we get last year's dollars, and that's essentially the hold harmless. And then all the new money, that new EIA money or that new roll-up will come through the new formula. So that's why those ADMs and those weighted pupil units are so important that we talk about in our 135th day. And just as a note, in our information section of the board packet, Dr. Harris has outlined the 135th day numbers so that you have those for your review. In terms of this new money that we have, the 227 million, we did make some adjustments for our 45th day. From this year, we went up, so that was included in. The 227 million is about 223.7 million from the general fund, and then 103.3 million from that EIA. So those represents this new money. Now, the Senate did change the weightings. I think there was a big push about career and technical education, so you'll see in their plan that weight changes, and that benefits School District 5. So in this House plan, we had 1.99% of that total new pot. In this plan, we're looking at 2.02%. So it does help us with these new weighting allocations. If we look at again, being up about 16 more pupils since the 45th day. Allotment, the step increase for all eligible, you'll see that reflected in this budget. You'll see the continuation of the $5,000 National Board Supplement represented. And we're going to be recommending some assignments as we get closer to the final one. One assignment that I want us to really look at are, and it doesn't have to be the $50 Fridays, but maybe continuing an aspect of $50 Fridays or some kind of incentive package throughout the year. Another one that we will bring forth as an assignment is 1.1 million. And a lot of these, again, from fund balance, but we have to wait till June to see what that actual number is, and then that's where we'll offer these assignments. One of the things that we, members of the board, want to consider is next year that the free meals program is going away. A lot of that is going to be returned as a cost to families. And as we already see now, Mr. Beedenbow can attest, the price of our food has gone up, milk has gone up. We lost the provider. I think we have only one provider for milks. And so this assignment will allow us to provide a free snack every day for every child. So that's something that we can, we're taking away the free meal program, but at minimum, a free snack every day for every child is something that assignment will allow us to do. We'll have more time to discuss that, but the June numbers will give us an opportunity to discuss the prioritization of those. So we will, if we look at our revenue and again, projected revenues here, we're really early here. I would like to say right off, basing our revenue on our Senate plan, we think it's important to, as we did this year, to do a mid-year adjustment. We are projecting maybe January, February. As you know, that 18.1% on that for those healthcare contributions, that doesn't roll in on July 1. That starts in January, so we'll have a better estimate of what that true impact looks like. And so, and that January, February time, it will be a good time to come and just shore up after we have those 45-day numbers. And in terms of the local revenue, we're presenting a budget that does not require any millage increase on the operation side, so we will stay with 246.1 mills on operating. You'll see what we're projecting that brings in, along with our other revenue line. When we look at the state revenue, again, going with the Senate version, You have the stake in the ground, which is the base, and then the new EIA roll-up on that new formula based on our weighted people units in the Senate plan. In terms of our homestead exemption, remember Tier 1 and Tier 2, those are very fixed. Tier 3 represents the penny, and that's what we're projecting on the homestead exemptions. We receive a credit from the retirement from PIBA, so that's the revenue we have there, and then represented in the we have other state revenues. Those are the what do we have with the retiree insurance? That's where that comes in for us. So that goes right back out. So we receive that from the state, goes right out to pay into those benefits. So if we go over to our percent change from last year, what you'll notice is in state aid, we're up 10%. But if you look at other financing sources, we're down 79%. Well, that's where that EIA money was taken from. All those lines were taken from that and rolled up into the new formula. So that's why you see that discrepancy there. So as a whole, we're really looking at being up about 4.8%, 4.9% from last year. Back to the two questions or two options. What do? Do we bring on more staff, or do we pay our staff more? And we decided to really look at putting this into salaries for our existing staff. We're all watching inflationary impact hit our construction projects, where it's hitting our faculty and our staff, and we want to make in this budget that it's important that we try to do as much as we can to give them the compensation representative of the inflationary impacts and the consumer price index that we see. So in this plan, we are looking at a very aggressive move on our first few sales on our salary schedule. We were at 39,853 on our zero. Everyone in the state is going to move to about 40,000 on that, everyone. Or they may go to 38, but our area districts are going to be above 40. We want to continue to be aggressive. We went with 41,600 as our zero experience bachelors. By lifting the entire teacher salary on those first scales of 41,600, plus the NARI program for those first 3 years, you almost experience a 10% increase if you're with us for the first 3 years. Take away the NARI, it is a significant, almost 6%, 5% increase. So if you factor out the NARI, which is not a part of salaries, but is a part of the compensation plan, we see the teachers will, across the board, average out a 2.2% increase plus the step. That's the proposal. The other issue, members of the board, was to do something to address the frontline workers, food services, cafeteria, our clerical staff. And so you will see in this budget, they would also get a 2% plus the step for all of our classified support staff, right? Classified. So 7 hour, 7.5 hour, 8 hour employees. The only group that would not receive the raise was the administration. So the administration does get the step, but we try to put maximum impact on teachers and staff in this budget. Bus drivers, we get to $15 an hour with this to try to get as competitive as possible As we know in the fall, we'll hear about shortages for teachers, shortages for bus drivers. We wanted to get as aggressive as possible with this new money here. So we appreciated the flexibility there that we have. We also think it's important outside of assignments under the continuing funds to have space for another nest. We saw a great impact with Nest at Irmo High School. We would like to bring that to Irmo Middle School as well. So we had to do some temporary movements this year for expectation coaches and to get the nest up. But now we would like to roll this into the funding. So again, all of this is done without an increase to the budget. Increase to for millage. We can do it within our existing assessed mills that we have. When you look at our fringe costs and its percentage of the, we've saw an increase in terms of our supplies and materials. Capital outlay represents our equipment that is not in your annual capital was over $5,000. Large pieces of equipment that we get. A lot of that this year was humidifiers and machines that we would buy, air scrubbers and things of that nature. And so other objects is mainly the insurance that we cover. So when you look at the percent increase that we'll see, you'll see the salaries reflected there. The large increase to that fringe that we have of a 12% increase. Now, those are monies we pay out. Employees don't necessarily see it in their bank accounts, but it is a benefit that we are paying. We have this year, as right now, we haven't really reached our last year's point this time with contractual services, so that's where we felt like we could get a little space there, a little comfort there. We're going to kind of maintain where we are in supplies, but capital outlay, again, that's areas outside of the capital budget where we make our improvements. That's our utilities. We're going to see a rise there. But if you look at other objects, that 20% increase, that's where our memberships, our dues, athletics, but the biggest part of that is our insurance contribution. So if that 18% maintains, we got to keep that increase there. If there's ever any relief there, we can roll that back into other parts of the budget. And then expenditures that we have in terms of transfers, student fees that we would pay to other institutions for learning. So with that, members of the board and community, this is the balanced budget that we would have at this point. As more information comes of the further review of this budget, we would again amend and go over this with you. But I think we would, with approval of first reading, we would like to start to message that 41.6 to our potential teachers. I think it's a great recruiting tool to know that this is where we're going to be, and so whatever happens, we feel like this is really closely aligned to the realities we will see. This does not require a millage increase, but I'm just going to outline what's available in terms of look-backs. So if you choose, but this budget that we're balancing here does not require any operational millage increase. But this is just kind of outlined just under Act 388 what those caps are, and if there are any look-back mills available. Just some dates to remember. What we're going to be following is the June 13th final reading. That will give us a better decision of where we are. But it's recruiting season, and we're trying to bring in teachers and plan for next year. So this first reading, we feel very confident that we can be competitive, especially with those frontline workers and those teachers and bus drivers, and be able to compete in keeping and retaining and recruiting to School District 5. So that's our, again, that's the first budget discussion, and we stand for any questions.
Dr. Ross, you don't expect a vote? I mean, this was on discussion?
This is discussion, yes.
Okay, so it'll be on the next, you'll put it on the next agenda for?
We will. We
reading.
will for its first reading. We wanted to, at least by the first Court and Board policy, present it to you. I think a liberty that we would like to take is, after presenting this, to at least start to go ahead and message where we're going to be to our teachers. So
I think the second and final reading, you have to have two meetings. You have to have a budget meeting, adjourn that, and then come back for a school board meeting. So does that only pertains to the second and final reading, correct?
Correct. But I think we can, in preparation for a passing of a budget, start to message where we will be.
Right.
Yeah.
I got you. Let's see. Thank you. Is any questions? I didn't think so. Okay, you're on, Mr. Hogan.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the meeting, please.
Have a second. Okay, all in favor? And we're done. 7-0, unanimous.